Welcome to a new video. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. The first story is called, "How about you do your job?" One of the phrases that always used to rub me the wrong way was a customer snarking, "Why don't you do your job?" One such customer came into the store and ordered a bunch of glass coffee tables. They are super heavy and it was always recommended to get these delivered. But no, she wasn't interested in that. She wanted them sent to the warehouse, where she'd pick them up. It takes a few weeks to get the tables in, and when this lady arrives, I know it's going to be an issue. Let me paint a picture for you. She's got those stylish denim tights that are meant to look like jeans, lots of orange fake tan and her chunky glasses on, the entire time. She's got the "I want to speak to the manager" haircut and attitude. She's immediately ordering us around and snapping her fingers. She wants all 3 tables loaded up into her small 4-wheel car. I've told my guys, let's just get this done as soon as possible. We have a massive shipment of stock coming in and I don't want to waste any more time with this woman. We get the first table across to her car, and I have a chat with them trying to figure out how we will make all these tables fit. She said, "Can you guys stop talking? I'm in a rush. We're just trying to figure out the best way to get the tables into your car. I don't want excuses. Just get it done. Maybe you could do a couple of trips? How about you shut up and do your job?" "Fine, we will do our job." I turn to the boys and tell them to take the table back as this lady starts yelling, "No. Please, sorry, keep loading. Sorry, no way. We are going to do our jobs as per company policy." I take her sales receipt and show her in the terms and conditions where it states, "Warehouse and sales workers will not be responsible for loading any customer's goods. If a customer elects pickup, it is their responsibility to load their own goods within the business times of the warehouse. Warehouse workers are not responsible or liable for loading a customer's goods onto any trolleys, and it is the sole responsibility of the customer." My boys and I go back to preparing the loading dock for the transfer, leaving this woman to load up the tables herself. When she tried to load the tables herself, she couldn't. And she almost dropped the table. Then she stared at us as we were unloading a truck, and with every minute that passed, she realized she wasn't getting any help. She came back a few days later with a bunch of guys to help her out. But we didn't lift a finger. The next story is called, "Find Your Own Way." My friend is educated as a carpenter, and this is a story from the time he was an apprentice. As it is with apprenticeships, being the apprentice means a lot of hazing from the more senior members of a company. This also happened to my friend. He had a 40-kilometer drive from his home to his workplace, and as he wasn't 18 yet, so he had to drive on a moped. During his apprenticeship, the company got an order for some work to do, in a bigger city, 2 hours further away. He asked his boss whether he should show up at the company earlier, to catch a ride with the other carpenters. However, the boss decided to be a jerk and join in on the hazing and said no, he would have to travel there by himself. He would, however, be compensated for the traveling expenses, regardless of how he would manage to get there. For the entire week, he showed up at work, at the bigger city, always well rested and suspiciously not seeming like he just had a 100-kilometer drive on a moped. The week after, they had finished the job and returned to normal, back in their home city. My friend came to his boss with the receipts and nearly gave the boss a heart attack. The boss figured traveling expenses meant paying for gasoline, which was his mistake. My friend came from a town with its own airport. The city they were working at also had a small airport. For the entire week, he had taken a flight to and from work, saving a lot of travel time, by the most expensive option possible. How had he been able to afford this? My friend's father was mad about the hazing, and when they wouldn't give my friend a ride, he had had enough. He would pay for the travel expenses for going by plane, teaching the boss a lesson. When everyone had figured what had happened, and in the following days picked up their jaws from the floor, everyday life resumed. My friend was still being hazed but has shown that he could bite back. It had become more of a friendly hazing. Even the boss, though he was bitter about the bill, could see the funny side of things, and my friend stayed with the company until he got his degree. The third story is called, "Do Our Slide on Our Presentation?" So, this has happened in science class when we were studying consumer product claims. My group chooses 2 glue brands and compared them. We had to do a presentation at the end, and I didn't think my group would know what to put on our presentation, so I pre-made the slides and did the 4 slides for myself, the graph, the background knowledge, and the data. On school the next day, I was basically done with the presentation, but my group wasn't. The guy next to me was doing work, but the other side of the table was messing around for some reason, so they only had 1 day to do their 4 slides, as we had 2 days to work on your presentation. The next day, Amy decided that she didn't really want to do her work, so she wrote down 2 or 3 words, even maybe a sentence, on her slides. I told her to do some more because I wrote 3 slides of 4 sentences and she did 2 with 3 words on it. She might have felt pity for me and said, "Why did you do so much?" I was bored? That's stupid. Do you want me to help you do your slides? No, you'll read your own slides when it comes to presentation day. All right. The good thing was that the teacher said if you wrote your own name to the slide you did, you would get an individual grade instead of a group grade. So I wrote down my name on my slides and sat back as my group did their work. The next day, the presentation day, Amy is suddenly so worried about the project. Is the presentation done? I don't know. She was confused by this. What do you mean, you don't know? I shrugged. I finished my slides if you're asking. I could see the panic in her eyes as I opened my computer and share the presentation with the teacher, making the slides unable to be edited. Amy grabs my computer and stares at it in horror as I took it back and slowly read the slides. I said, Amy, this conclusion is pretty bad. No, it isn't. I read the slide out loud. Our conclusion is that glue A is better than glue B. Another person from the group said, let me see. So I passed my computer around. Look at the next slide too. I think Amy did it too. Now you see, the person that messed around had his slides done already and was done. When we presented, I was proud of my work, and when it came to Amy, I passed the microphone to her and she read her slide. The teacher was confused and asked her more about it, but she had no idea what she was saying and none of us was helping her. The next story is called Play Games, Win Prizes. I worked for a large chain as a frontline manager. For this chain, the pharmacist is the owner of the shop. They run it, but the company still owns the whole thing. I guess it's like they are a corporate franchisee. Anyways, this shop had a history of not being able to keep a manager in the role I just took on for very long. The training was practically non-existent and nothing was documented. One day, within my first 3 months, I'm sick and can barely get out of bed. As it's a health and wellness business, and as I couldn't work even if I wanted to, I called the back of the house manager. This manager acts as the assistant manager to the owner, as they were real-life friends. I said I was sick and couldn't be into work. I was asked who would be covering for me as I had to open the shop every day. I said I didn't know. I was told that, as a manager, I was responsible for this and needed to find someone. Fair enough. Even though nobody told me about this, I pulled out my staff listing and found someone to cover my shift who had keys and could open the store. Keep in mind that most of my staff was part-time at the time and I only had one full-time employee that worked from Monday to Friday. When I got into work the next day, the assistant manager told me that I couldn't call in sick and that the next time I called in sick, I shouldn't bother coming back. I was shocked, as this is very unprofessional and I didn't expect it coming from the second in command at the store. My one full-time employee starts telling me that I'm the best manager they've had for the last 2 years, and during that time they went through 6 managers before me. I'm told that I've done more in my time there than all the previous managers did in total. Things like having the staff cash out on company time, not making people stay to find errors or recount on their own time, basically not breaking our labor laws. So, the owner calls me into their office and tells me that, due to my sick day, I won't be paid for it, as I am still on probation, and that the accountant, who does the payroll, will be instructed as such. This was unexpected, as I am a salaried employee, and probation or not, I know this isn't right, but I agree and get on with my day. Being that there were lots of part-time people that worked here, we had an actual punch clock to clock in and clock out for all employees, including me. Being a salaried manager, whenever one of my staff couldn't work, and if I couldn't find a replacement, I ended up covering the shift myself. I looked at it as an opportunity to get to know my evening staff better, as I usually never saw them. On the paycheck that my sick day happened, I also needed to cover a few extra shifts for other employees, as everyone seemed to get sick at about the same time. And as the manager, I'm the one who totals up the time cards prior to giving them over to the accountant. These time cards can't be faked, as they are physically punched and encoded with dates and times from the machine. So I handed my team's time cards with mine on top to the accountant, who looks at me and reminds me about the instructions she's gotten from the owner. She didn't like it but had her orders. I tell her that I understand and here is my time card. She looks at it, raises her eyebrows at me, and before she can ask a question, I remind her that I am not a salaried employee, as I'm still on probation, and that normal pay rules should apply, even though this is illegal. She looks at me, smiles and confirms that was what she was told by the owner. It turns out that deducting the sick day I missed, but adding on the 3 extra shifts I had to work that period to cover for other staff not showing up, I ended up working 96 hours that payday. So, because I wasn't salaried, the accountant paid me time and a half for the extra 16 hours I worked. Because I knew that these things weren't really legal, I decided I was done with this company and this boss. I emailed my friend, who helped me get the job, who just happened to be the head of their corporate security, the story, and gave him permission to send it to whoever he thinks would need to see it. Later that week, I got a call from another employer, asking if I could start immediately. I said yes, of course, and went back into work. This call happened just after I had gotten home from work. I walked into work, went into the back office to collect my personal things, and came back out. My shift supervisor was perplexed as I had just left for the night. I shook his hand, and told him that it was niece working with him. He was shocked and asked, "You're firing me?" I actually laughed at that and told him, "No, I'm quitting, you get to keep working here." I went to hand my keys and resignation to the night pharmacist and told them to pass it on to the owner. My letter consisted of just "I quit" and my signature. I went back a few weeks later to get some stuff. I still shop there as it's close to my home. And the one full-time employee greets me with a big smile and tells me the following in hushed tones. "A few days after you left, some suits from head office came in, had a meeting with the owner, and left. When the owner left after that day, they haven't seen the owner since. Seems the suits came and took the store away from them based on the owner's inability to keep your old position filled." The employee didn't know about the email I sent to the head of security, but when I mentioned it, the employee lit up like a light bulb and said, "So that's why." The icing on the cake for me was that the owner knew about this connection I had with the head of security, as they were listed as a reference and the owner contacted them directly about the referral. The last story is called "Be Careful What You Ask For." This morning, when I drove my kids to school, a song from Rod Stewart and Ronald Isley started playing. The story takes place in the late 1990s, so although cell phones were popular, it was a far cry from what we have today. If someone was needed, we had to call their pager and wait for a call back. About 20 years ago, my husband and I moved to a different state from where we were both born and raised. The move was for his job, so rather than pursue a job in my regular field, I found a job in a regular office. When I went for the interview, it turned out that my soon-to-be boss grew up one town over from me, so rather than a usual half-hour interview, it turned into over an hour of chatting about our sports team back home, the differences between the states, etc. Karen, the second in command, sat through the interview and looked bored. She loudly yawned and stretched her arms, despite the fact that the boss and I didn't realize how bothered she was. She also had a Karen haircut before it was popular. By the time I got back to our apartment, just minutes away, the agency called and said that the company wanted me and was willing to bet the rest of the contract I had with the place in order to make sure I worked with them. As it turned out, I was taking Karen's old job. She got a promotion, so you would think that everything would be cool, at least I thought that. But I was wrong. While Karen wasn't my boss in any way, shape or form, and had no supervisory power over me, she let it be known that I was the new one in the office. She was hired only 6 months earlier, so she was new herself. Karen was known to be a pest in the office. Nothing major, but she would do petty things that would bother people. She would make microwave popcorn and leave the bag in for 5 minutes, making the entire floor smell horrible. She would listen to her voicemails on speaker, even when she was sitting with her hands idle. During that time, I thought I was pregnant and had to schedule a doctor's appointment. It would have been a welcome surprise, as my husband and I were married for a few months. It turned out the stress of moving and being a newly married got to me, and my schedule was off. I wasn't pregnant during that time, just stressed. Karen overheard my conversation with setting up the appointment, and reminded me that while I was at work, I was on company time and wasn't allowed to make personal calls. The floor plan was very open, and you could hear everyone's conversation during the day. It became a usual din of white noise, with everyone talking quietly. The boss was fantastic. He had a great sense of humor and was super friendly. I remember one day, I walked back to my cube from the fax machine. He cranked up the small radio he had in his corner cube. The song I mentioned in the beginning. It rang throughout the office, and as he turned around, he saw me, then took me in his arms and we danced. He twirled me around, I laughed, and a few others in the office tapped their foot or did a little dance in their chair. I can't tell you how excellent the people in the office were. Except for Karen. After the dance with my boss, she walked up to me while I was at the coffee maker. She went on to tell me that what boss did was completely inappropriate and I could sue for harassment. I rolled my eyes and told her to lighten up. The boss was in his late 60s and would always talk about his grandchild. He was the kind of boss that everyone would want to have. Karen would often go to meetings in another part of the floor. Since she was somewhat close to my cube, every second she was away was heaven. In the meetings, she would leave her pager on her desk, as any matters could have been handled right then and there. Fast forward a few months, and both she and I were settled in our new jobs. Soon she became distracted because she and her husband were set to buy their first home. During this time, it was a seller's market, meaning that properties were scarce and anything that came on the market sold at or way above the asking price. My husband worked with someone who paid $50,000 above the asking price. The dream home that Karen and her husband wanted was a 4-bedroom, 3-bathrooms house on 1 acre of land, just on the outskirts of town. Karen made good money, as did her husband, so the sale would be based on both incomes. Soon, Karen thought that my role in the office was her private secretary. I wasn't, but what was once a huge favor turned into a demand of, do this now. After the first few times of nicely asking me to fax something, she would ask me for the confirmation report. Although I was clearly busy with my paperwork, I'd look through the pile of piles and find what she needed. Soon, even when she could see I was busy and we had an office secretary whose job it was to fax for others, Karen demanded that I do it. She was tired of not getting an immediate response when the fax went through. She insisted that I not only do the clerk work that wasn't part of my job, but that I let her know what I do, every step of the way. Every step of the way. Soon, we had the infamous day of Karen being in an hours-long meeting with her pager on her desk. Her husband was at their apartment, playing phone tag with the realtor, waiting for a response to their offer on their dream house. The closed conference door meant do not disturb. Basically, unless your hair was on fire or the woman next to you was in labor, do not disturb. The rule was set by Karen, as she didn't like interruptions for what she called petty reasons, such as someone landing a big account, etc. Karen gave me 2 different papers to fax. Every step of the way, remember? So I called her voicemail multiple times and explained every step I did. I called her when I stood up, walked to the fax machine, used the ladies' room, took a sip of coffee, sat back down, went back to get the confirmation reports, etc. I also marked each voicemail as urgent. Her voicemail box was soon full, and there was no way of her husband to get through to her for her to agree upon the final offer to the house, which was higher than the asking price. She didn't have a cell phone, and this was way before texting, and she left her pager on her desk. The door was shut, so nobody could disturb, for any reason. Her own rule. Nobody could get a message to Karen, so she wasn't able to get back to her husband. Someone else bought the house, and although I wish I could say it was my husband and me, Karen and her husband were devastated. She asked me why I didn't get her when he tried to call, and I reminded her that we couldn't have personal calls during work hours. A few months later my husband got a job transfer and we moved again, this time to a different state. About 10 years ago, I joined Facebook and soon friended my old boss and a few former co-workers. I found out that after I left, Karen lost her punching bag and, combined with the stress of losing the house of her dreams, she and her husband soon separated. She left the company, and nobody knows what happened to her or her marriage. She wanted me to do something that wasn't my job and wanted to know what I did every step of the way. So, I did. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. Let me know what you think about the stories in the comment section below. Have a great day. Bye bye.